from the Digital Media Center on the campus of Southern Oregon University in Ashland, Oregon. This is Ramping Up Your English, an educational program for intermediate level English language learners. Here's your host for Ramping Up Your English, John Letts.
Welcome to Ramping Up Your English, winner of the 2020 Southern Oregon Television Awards for Best Education Show. I'm producer and host John Letts. I want to welcome you to this new episode, episode 99. And this episode, for people who are trying to improve their English skills, is going to take a deep dive into the content of our content-based approach to our thematic unit on Native Americans. So what this means is that from time to time, when you're using this content-based approach, you actually have content as the main feature of some episodes. And we did that before when we did the episode of when Columbus came to America and what kind of experiences that gave the Native Americans. Well, we're going to do the same thing today. We're going to have most of this program be a video, and the video is called Los Espanoles, which in Spanish is the Spaniards. Well, Columbus was by far not the only Spaniard who came to America, and the thing that makes his so-called discovery of America different from that of the Vikings is that people kept coming after him. And the change was very profound because of all this activity. And this activity is the focus of today's programs. So let's watch this video called Los Espanoles.
What vision was this? Deep in the desert of Mexico, Spanish soldiers seeking slaves counted 3 white men, mostly naked, and a black man. Was that some kind of a moving village of Indians at their flanks? Even these slave hunters were speechless, unable to act, frozen in their bewilderment. How did this strange entourage come to be in the Mexican desert? What effect might they have on the expansion of Spanish settlement? Would this interfere with their mission to collect slaves? Like so many things in America, the story starts with Columbus. Europeans were changing America, but America was also changing them, at least some of them. Changed so completely by their experiences in the New World that some would devote themselves to better treatment of Native Americans instead of enriching themselves at their expense. And such work was badly needed. The Taino people of the West Indies were devastated by the murderous mistreatment and enslavement from the arrival of Europeans, as well as by the diseases for which they had no immunity. Their fall was so severe that not enough remained to do the work, and the idea of bringing enslaved Africans gained traction. Columbus lived only a few years beyond his 4th and final voyage. His benefactors were soon gone as well. First Queen Isabella and later King Ferdinand died, buried in their beloved Alhambra, and later in Granada's Basilica. Their family tombs are imposing hunks of marble. Their bodily remains rest here in the basement of the church. This didn't cool the fever of exploration. Vasco da Gama reached India for Portugal by sailing around the tip of Africa. This put Portugal on top of the world economically and made da Gama a national hero. The Pope divided the world into two areas of influence between Portugal and Spain for newly discovered lands. Pedro Alvarez Cabral claimed Brazil for Portugal after he claimed he was blown off course by a storm. Cabral didn't stay long enough to see how this contact affected the people living there, but other Europeans would follow. Now Portugal had a foothold in America, and it was in their sphere of influence set by the Treaty of Tordesillas. Italian navigator John Cabot explored the northern reaches of North America for England. Another Italian navigator, Amerigo Vespucci, explored the coast of South America for Spain, discovering the mouth of the Amazon River. Vespucci became convinced that these lands were not islands approaching India or China, as Columbus insisted. He referred to this landmass as the New World, El Mundo Nuevo, and a mapmaker used his first name, Amerigo, to label this previously unknown land. It would become known henceforth as America. As the 1500s began, a frenzy of explorations were active in North and South America by both Spanish and Portuguese navigators. The year 1513 brought two major developments by Spain. Vasco Nunez de Balboa crossed the Isthmus of Central America to discover the Pacific Ocean. He claimed the whole body of water for Spain, and further proved that Amerigo Vespucci was right, that this land was nowhere near Asia. That same year, Ponce de Leon explored Florida. The discovery of Florida would entice other explorers to North America's mainland, and would someday help explain the mystery of those four strange men leading a contingent of Native Americans in the desert near today's Sinaloa. Ponce de Leon turned his attention to governing Puerto Rico. He was among the early Spaniards who enslaved native people. The savage cruelty heaped upon Native Americans by Spaniards was so severe that Ponce de Leon is considered one of the most humane of the Spanish invaders. Humane by comparison. He only enslaved native people and put down their desperate revolts. The indigenous people of the West Indies had developed large sea-going vessels, giving them mobility in the Caribbean Sea and the Gulf of Mexico. This helped tie the Taíno together as a people and a culture. It also facilitated trade between the islands. The Mayan people developed a hieroglyphic writing system and produced books recording events of interest and importance. They also recorded their history in stone, producing friezes that recorded major events in impressive cities from Tikal to Palenque. The Maya studied the sky, recording astronomical events, and developed a sophisticated calendar. European sailors used navigation instruments and produced charts, maps, and logs. They also had scribes who would write meticulous records of their activities. One of these was Bartholomew de las Casas. He participated in early explorations and was one of the first to be granted land, along with the right to enslave Americans, by the Spanish king. When it came to the cruel and murderous treatment of Native Americans, he wrote everything down. His journals revealed the wide gap between the royal decrees to treat Native Americans with friendship and love, and the reality of savage abuse that Spaniards heaped on these new royal subjects. The year 1519 saw two events that permanently changed the lives of thousands of indigenous Americans and people as far away as some islands in the Pacific Ocean. The mighty Aztec Empire dominated Mesoamerica in 1519. The Triple Alliance had strong warrior societies that demanded tribute from other city-states. Hereditary leader Montezuma worried when he saw an unknown body in the sky. But his worries deepened when he heard of strangers who came from the east. Imagine the depths of his worry when he received reports of what these strangers did at Cholula. Many of the Aztecs' noble families were murdered by these strangers in the royal city. Montezuma sent gifts to the strangers, hoping they would go away. Instead, they advanced with resentful tribute-paying rivals toward the capital city of Tenochtitlan. The invaders saw a city like nothing they had seen in Spain. It was built on a human-made island connected to the mainland by causeways. It had vibrant markets, as well as a thriving cultural scene. It was clean and colorful, with imposing public buildings. Montezuma knew he had to learn about these violent invaders, so he met with them, treating their leader, Hernán Cortés, as if he were the vanquished god Quetzalcoatl. That seemed doubtful after Spaniards murdered unarmed civilians who were carrying out a religious ritual. After complying with Cortés's demand for gold, Montezuma was killed, maybe by his Spanish captors, or maybe by his own outraged people. Resistance was organized by Aztec leader Cuauhtémoc, and the invaders were forced out of Tenochtitlan. Their rear guard of 800 men killed by Aztec warriors or by drowning in the lake. Cortés returned with his Indian allies and with a vengeance. The effect was deadly. Cuauhtémoc was captured, tortured, and killed. Weakened by diseases and confused by rumors, warriors were overcome by the invaders. Cortés left the city of Tenochtitlan bewildered and ravaged with European diseases and dead warriors. With the fall of the Triple Alliance, a wave of Spaniards seeking riches and souls soon followed into the mainland in Mexico. The same year that Cortés landed in Mexico, a voyage by Portuguese navigator Ferdinand Magellan sailed 5 ships with 277 crew members from Spain to travel around the world, hoping to achieve the first circumnavigation. Magellan survived 3 mutiny attempts before finding a passage to the Pacific Ocean. He then sailed west in a quest to find Asia. Magellan was killed in the Philippines, so Juan Sebastian Elcano assumed command of the remaining ships and completed the circumnavigation, returning to Spain with 18 survivors out of the 277 that started the journey. Spain now had claims in the Pacific Ocean. They would now compete with Portugal in the trade of spices and other riches. This would soon involve contact with people on the west coast of America. Spanish galleons would soon send riches back to Spain in treasure fleets. Now Spain would control both the east and west coasts of America. That would increase the deadly contact between Native Americans and Europeans. Spaniards soon flooded into Mexico, looting whatever gold, silver, and other riches they could force from Native Americans. Silver ore was discovered at Guanajuato in central Mexico. Mines were soon established there, dug out and worked by Indian slaves. Soon, silver from the New World flooded into the royal treasury in Spain. Those mines still produce some silver, even today. While slaves are no longer the source of mine labor, the work is still dangerous and unhealthy. Great fear had spread across the Inca Empire in South America. A war of succession was taking place between royal brothers Huáscar and Atahualpa, a civil war that was breaking the peace. Very strange things started happening. Very strange-looking men with never-before-seen animals were holding Atahualpa hostage for a room full of gold. There were pitched battles to remove these dangerous strangers. Then rival Huáscar was assassinated, and Atahualpa was executed by the leader Francisco Pizarro. Under Spanish control, the once mighty and well-organized Inca Empire was in ruins. Every family was required to send a member to the deadly mines of Potosí, and the Inca system of life was destroyed. Much worse were the European diseases that swept through the population. Native Americans living in Florida were confronted with a mass of very strange-looking people. What manner of people were these? They were pale of skin. This horde of 300 men were led by Pánfilo de Narvaez. He had been at Pizarro's side when he plundered the Inca treasury. Narvaez set out with 600 men and supply ships to establish a colony on the coast of Mexico. It seems that the very hurricanes that haunt tropical waters tried to repel the party. Alvar Cabeza de Vaca was treasurer of the expedition. He kept careful notes of all that transpired. He was there to be sure the king got his share of the riches they hoped to seize from this land. A hurricane damaged ships and supplies. Another storm pushed them to Florida. Half the expedition landed, while the other half stayed on ships to resupply them. The party immediately contacted the people living near the Gulf Coast, where Tampa Bay is today. Some mound cities still existed from the Mississippian culture. Traditions of hospitality demanded that these strange visitors be offered food. A group of 300 was difficult to feed, and soon they demanded more food than the community could provide. Here we see part of a pattern by Spanish conquistadors like Cortés and Pizarro. Tribal leaders were kidnapped and ransomed, first for food and later for gold. Narvaez was directed north to the Appalachian people near the Florida Panhandle. Word of how Narvaez mistreated his hosts preceded him, and he was not welcome in the land of the Appalachians. The forests and swamps of Florida provided an advantage to the native population, who knew the country well. They were able to kill some of the invaders. Florida natives were as desperate to rid their land of these intruders as the Spaniards were to escape. One leader had seen his mother fed alive to dogs of war by Narvaez. Narvaez had ordered his ships to meet him at a harbor he believed to be too big to miss. There was no such harbor, and there were no ships on the coast to rescue the survivors. In desperation, while fending off attack by Florida natives, they fashioned several boats from the hides of their horses. Native Floridians watched the invaders launch their untested craft into the Gulf of Mexico. The Native Americans were glad to see the strangers go, just as the Spaniards, no doubt, were grateful to be beyond the range of the Indians' weapons. Those who weren't killed in Florida were now mostly adrift in the Gulf of Mexico. The excursion's treasurer was in command of one of the boats. Then the storms came. The flimsy boats were no match for the storm. Parties lost contact with each other. When the storm finally let up, 4 excursion members found themselves alone, adrift in the merciless Gulf of Mexico. Thirst, hunger, and fatigue drove them to the mainland, but their practice of holding hostages resulted in hostility. At other times they were welcomed with assistance and attempts at friendship. Once, when several Spaniards drowned, the people on the coast wept with the survivors. But when half their population died of strange diseases, the Spaniards were forced back into the sea to face its violent storms. Parched with thirst, sunburned and famished, they came ashore near today's Galveston, Texas, into lands controlled by various small tribes. Scattered along the Texas coast, no more than 80 of the 300 had survived. Narvaez did not make it. They were rescued and given food and rest enough to recover from their near-fatal ordeal. Then, in a switch from the prevailing behavior in the New World, they were enslaved by the Indians who had saved them. The expedition treasurer was among the 4 enslaved survivors. He heard of other expedition members being held by nearby tribes and even met some of them, but as the years passed, those stories ended. The ships of the expedition searched the coast of Florida. These searches were all unsuccessful. As time passed, the Navaez Expedition failed to return to New Spain, and they were all believed to be lost. That was almost the case. Alvar Nunez Cabeza de Vaca carried on trade between native groups. When he saw a chance to gather survivors to escape, there were only 3 others remaining. The group of 4 traded with Native Americans as they sought to find New Spain. Some groups were friendly, even guiding them. Using Indian trade routes, they headed south, but then changed course northwestward. When they entered the dry southwest, they found native villages farther apart. It's here that their journey of survival became so much more.
Aquella misma noche que llegamos vinieron unos indios a Castillo y dijéronle que estaban muy malos de la cabeza, rogándole que los curase. Y después que los hubo santiguado y encomendado a Dios, en aquel punto los indios dijeron que todo el mal se les había quitado.
The survivors earned a reputation as faith healers. They found themselves invited to village after village to heal the afflicted. A pattern emerged when they left one village for another. Most of the people went with them. When they arrived at the new village, people from the previous village would ransack the new village and offer the pillaged goods to the faith healers. In this way, Cabeza de Vaca, 2 other Spaniards, and African Estevanico became the first from these continents to explore the American Southwest. Imagine the excitement in the villages of the region. This activity went on for years. Travelers from villages begged the healers to visit their village, knowing that a huge mass of followers would come with them. When Cabeza de Vaca's collection of humanity drew near Culiacan, they saw 3 Spanish soldiers looking at them, too stunned to move.
Estuviéronme mirando mucho espacio de tiempo, tan atónitos, que ni me hablaban ni acertaban a preguntarme nada.
They weren't sure their vision was real or some kind of mirage. They heard one yelling, "Cabeza de Vaca," the head of a cow. As the soldiers moved in, the apparent leader explained who they were, but that expedition was lost 8 years before. The astonished soldiers started looking hard at the Indian followers. They were in western Mexico to capture and enslave Native Americans. Cabeza de Vaca stood here between 2 cultures. His years among America's indigenous people had changed him. He insisted that his Indian companions not be enslaved, and he devoted the rest of his life to advocating for them. Cabeza de Vaca never returned to the Native Americans with which he had spent those incredible years. He returned to Spain to write an account of his experiences. His main audience was King Carlos I. Much of his account has been corroborated by stories passed down by Native Americans in the Southwest. Cabeza de Vaca may have been the first to urge the king to enforce better treatment for America's indigenous population. He would not be the last. We'll learn about that in the next video about Native Americans.
You're watching Ramping Up Your English. I'm John Letts, and this is episode 99. And we're just about out of time for this episode. So here's another view, another step that is taken in the effect of Europeans on Native Americans. And what we've seen and focused on is those from Spain, los Espanoles. Well, that concludes episode 99 of Ramping Up Your English. I want to thank everyone who's helped this series, Ramping Up Your English, and especially the people at RVTV. And by the people, I mean both the crew, which is all volunteers, as well as the staff that has been very helpful to us throughout the years of this program. Thank you, our viewers, for watching. See you next time on Ramping Up Your English. I'm John Letts.
You've been watching Ramping Up Your English, a support program for intermediate level English language learners. Learn more. Visit our website at letscreate.org. You can also watch or download today's program at archive.org/details/roguetv. Join us next time on RVTV Voices for Ramping Up Your English.